All right, well, to get started, let's take a look at the results for the House of Cards competition. I sent an email of this out last week, but let's take another look just because we've got a little bit of time to do that. Almost all of the teams were able to achieve success, but let's look at the winning recipe. The group that had $100,000 in total profits. So it looks like one of the keys to their success was using relatively few cards, only 25 cards. And so keeping expenses low, you notice that they actually had the lowest costs. In addition to having the highest revenue, well, no, not the highest. Someone else got higher revenue, but they did have the lowest cost and the second to highest revenue. Assembled it very quickly. Looks like it was relatively tall, although not the tallest. There were two other designs that were taller and one that was as tall. And then as for the strength, it was very strong, but remember that there's a cap on the number of pennies you could get that would actually count towards a strength bonus. It was up to 100 total pennies, so meaning 90 additional pennies above the original 10. And so they got a time bonus, they got a strength bonus, a height bonus, but as far as looking at the numbers, maybe the one single element that made them the most successful was minimizing costs. So, any additional thoughts from the team of Cardwell, Collins, and Conley? What made it go so well? You met outside of class? You didn't just show up and wing it? No? Okay. So during your meetings outside of class, was there a certain pattern that you followed? How did you figure out what design you wanted? Okay, so you tried several different ideas.
Different shapes.
What sorts of ideas did you discard?
Folding cards. It's not, you can't get it fold.
Mm-hmm.
So it knocks off the tower and then gives you a
Yeah. Well, I think that you learned an important part of the design process is something that's called iteration. And iteration means that you do things over and over again, trying to optimize the end result. And in the case of this project, by constructing a couple of different designs and then seeing how they did and throwing them away if it wasn't good, iteration is a way of ultimately finding something that's going to give you a good result in the end. Let's take a look at a couple of announcements here. First of all, the reading quiz for Chapter 4 will be available until noon on Wednesday. It's closed as of now. For the Chapter 3 quiz is closed, so now this one's open. I've posted some textbook review materials online in our course folder on MU Online. These are some PowerPoint slides that Dr. Hijazi has prepared as a way for you to, for example, prepare for the midterm exam. It summarizes a lot of the key points that are in the reading chapters, and those will be available generally after you've taken the quiz so that you can review for the midterm. And then I'm going to be handing out an assignment today called the Keys to Success assignment, and that assignment should be completed by this coming Wednesday. So you'll need to bring it to class 2 days from now. Any questions about these announcements? Okay. Well, just to get your mental juices flowing on the subject of today's class, the Keys to Success, I'm going to hand out this in-class exercise. And so I'd like you to just briefly think, look over. There's 4 questions here. Read them all before you start writing so that you get just an overview of something. I'm going to ask you to identify one of the achievements from your life that you're most proud of. That's question 1. But then consider questions 2, 3, and 4 before you pick which achievement you'd like to identify. And then we're going to have a brief discussion about that here in class. And so let me hand those down. If there's any extras, just pass it to the row behind you. I think I've printed enough so that we'll have plenty. Here you go. Sometimes it's a little bit, I don't know, not intimidating, but you want to be shy or a little bit modest about your achievements, and so it can be difficult to speak out in the open about these sorts of things. But get together with another student, get in pairs, and talk to one another about your responses on 1 through 4. And then we're going to have a discussion as a class about what some of the common themes might have been. So I won't ask anybody to embarrass themselves or anything like that in the whole classroom environment. But get together in pairs and go through and talk to each other about the achievements and then all the related questions that you've got. Okay, well, let's have a general discussion about this stuff. First of all, how do people set their goals? If you have an achievement that you're proud of, it's probably at the end of a very long string of decisions and smaller goals. The sorts of things that people will say is like one of the achievements from your life that you're most proud of, it's usually not something that they woke up in the morning and decided to do that evening. In most cases, it's something that they really worked towards for a long time. And so when you're talking to your partner, did you get a sense for how they picked what their achievement was going to be, or like what sorts of things get selected? Any thoughts about that? All right, academic accomplishments. And so what does that tell us about our value system if an academic accomplishment is the achievement that's being worked towards? It tells us that education is valuable. So what about, if in terms of the categories, so there's academic accomplishments, and the why of that. Why is it meaningful? It's because we value education. Maybe it means that you'll have a secure future. We see a strong relationship between educational achievement and employability, maybe. So ultimately, the why of it, why is it important? Why is it an achievement? Maybe it's employability. There's probably a lot of other things too. All right, so what about some other types of achievements? Just the category. What's that? Musical. All right, musical achievements. Why is a musical achievement significant to someone? Like in the same way that it may lead to employability for an academic accomplishment, why is a musical accomplishment something that someone would feel good about? Okay, so if they have a passion about it, they feel like they're expressing their creativity. So maybe it's a creative expression. All right. Other types of categories that got listed? All right. Why is it that people care about athletic accomplishments? Because not everybody's athletic, so it's maybe a feeling of being exclusive.
That's what they like to do. You want to be good at what you do.
All right. Some people do that and they want to be good at what they do. All right. Are there other? What does it say about our value system that we?
Hard work.
Okay, it embodies hard work, and so illustrates. But chopping wood is hard work too. So what is it about sports that makes that special and we don't watch chopping wood? Well, actually you do watch sawing wood on some, like ESPN 7, right? Or something like that when it's the lumberjack contests. So what, huh? Competitiveness, yeah. We admire people who are have determination, endurance, or maybe cooperation, you know, like illustration of teamwork.
You don't want to lose.
Okay. So competitiveness, it says that we value competitiveness and cooperation at the same time, I guess, in the case of team sports, right? I'm just now in my later ages. I'm positively ancient. I'm 36 right now. I'm just now starting to find that I actually am a little bit competitive, and I never was until just recently. Competitiveness and, what were we saying? And cooperation. Cooperation. What's that?
Midlife crisis, trying to show these people you're still young.
Maybe, no, I think, I always tell my family members I'm running from death. You know, as I'm getting older, I'm getting scared about being old, and so maybe that's what makes me want to focus more on trying to stay in shape, is running from death, right? So, all right, so those are some 3 categories. Was there anything else that we should talk about, the different types of things that people are proud of? Okay. So why? Why do people do these things? Well, I guess we've sort of talked about the why of it already. Now, how? What were some of the methods that people use to achieve their accomplishments? Repetition. All right. Has anybody heard about the 10,000 hour rule? There was a book that came out a few years ago called Outliers. It's written by a columnist for the New Yorker named Malcolm Gladwell. And in his book, he identified all of these different cases, from the Beatles to Bill Gates to Michael Jordan, all these different people who, by the time they really got into a position to show off what they're able to do, they'd already had at least 10,000 hours of practice doing it. So in the case of Bill Gates, it was just sort of an accident that he went to a school that had computers when hardly any schools would have computers. In the case of the Beatles, they spent night after night after night in Germany. They were working at sort of like a club for soldiers in Germany, like a nightclub. And they just would play like 6 hours every night for several years. And they honed their musicianship by doing that over and over again. And Malcolm Gladwell in this book points out that people who spend 10,000 hours practicing something are almost inevitably they'll succeed at what they do. It's sort of the minimum proficiency for really high-level performance. So practice is one method that's used for accomplishing these big goals. What are some other approaches to achievement? What are the keys to success when you... Okay, self-discipline, very good. Determination. What is determination? How do you know if you've got it? Okay. Or maybe just push harder than you would otherwise want to be. You know, overcoming your own mental internal obstacles in some cases. Determination in school might just mean that it's something as simple as choosing to do your assignments before you have fun. You know, it's a matter of priorities, and sometimes it's really interesting. Sometimes, you know, there's the idea of making a New Year's resolution. You have the list of all the things that you want to accomplish, but sometimes we don't think about why we want to accomplish them. Like, what is it about one of the goals we have for this coming year that makes us want to put that on our list? And if we think about what we're trying to achieve, like what feeling we're trying to get from ourselves in picking those goals, I think it's easier to really hone in on what we should spend our time doing. And so in the case of your schoolwork, if you think about why you chose engineering, or why you voluntarily decided to put yourself in classes that are a lot harder than most of the other students at Marshall are going to be in, you know, what was the point of making that selection, then it'll be easier on a day-to-day basis to make the sacrifices required for success. Okay, so speaking of sacrifice, what sorts of things did people mention they had to give up in order to achieve their goals? What did you guys talk about in terms of sacrifices? Time?
Yeah, like spending time with your friends and family.
All right.
Or just other activities like during school, games, that kind of stuff that you could go to.
Okay. So it's good to spend time with friends and family. Sometimes you have to sacrifice good things in order to do other good things. A student sometimes will tell me that they've got a family member who is like competing in a softball tournament or something, and they're not sure if they can come to class. And that's great that their family member's in a softball tournament, and sometimes they'll put it like they're asking for my permission to skip class so they can do this other thing. And I just tell them it's your choice. You've got a lot of good things you can do in your life, and you have to identify the one that's most important to you. And so sometimes it requires sacrifice of time. Are there other sacrifices that were discussed? How so?
Well, just on my personal level, I played my whole senior season high school football, but what turned out to be a torn rotator cuff because I knew I had to play.
Yeah.
Play or not going to play.
So you played through the pain, huh? All right. What other sacrifices? Okay, what do you mean by that? Okay, so you had to make choices on what you wanted to give up. You choose athletics over one thing. When I go for a run, I'm giving up time with my boys. I have two sons, ages 7 and 9, and so when I go running, I'm not playing catch with them. Those are two good things, but I choose to spend some of my time away from other people just because we all make sacrifices for what we want. Let's take a look at some of the things that are covered in the textbook. And this is one of those chapters, I don't talk about very many of the chapters in class, but this is one of them that I do because I think it's particularly important for you to think at the beginning of this really long journey you're going to go on of earning an engineering degree, why you're doing it, and some of the approaches that you can take to be successful. And so I think this is a really good investment. And the homework assignment I'm giving you today is an attempt to formalize that process, to think through, examine your motives for being in engineering. So the book says that commitment is a decision to be successful. It's not a hope to be successful. It's just deciding that you're going to do something and you're going to do what it takes to achieve it. And so in the case of engineering, what it takes to be successful is just for there to be no plan B. Don't give yourself a plan B if you absolutely want to succeed in engineering, because plan B is going to look really attractive at some point. You'll be working on a reinforced concrete assignment at 3 a.m. some Thursday night, and you'll realize, well, I could drop engineering and switch into this other major X, whatever it is. And if you seriously entertain easier alternatives, then it'll just be too tempting. And so commitment is defined as the decision to be successful, and an important part of that is setting appropriate goals. So what's the difference between an appropriate goal and something that's not an appropriate goal? What do you think they mean by that, an appropriate goal?
Realistic.
All right. That's an important characteristic of goals. So realistic. Like I wouldn't say I want to be president, because that's not realistic, right? It's not realistic. Realistic is one important attribute. Another one is quantifiable. And the reason why I say that is that a goal isn't appropriate if you don't know whether or not you've achieved it. So I want to be nicer to people. Now, how do I know if I've done that? I want to be nicer to people. So if I have a goal that I don't want any students complaining to the department head this semester that I was mean to them, that's a goal I'll know whether or not I achieved because it's measurable. But a goal that's ambiguous or vague, or you don't actually have any way to track it, is not an appropriate goal. So quantifiable is one of them. And another is within your ability to achieve or impact. And so world peace, if my goal of world peace wouldn't be an appropriate goal because it's not something that I can control. I want to think about what are the things that I can actually change. And so it may be that I wanted to volunteer at some sort of a humanitarian organization, or something that actually is within my capacity to have an impact on. And so your goals should be specific. They should not be vague. They should not be non-quantifiable. Commitment is a large part of staying focused on what you're trying to achieve. And I've had some students tell me that to stay focused, they put up little motivators to themselves that they'll see around their house or apartment. Like one student said that he put up a picture of his daughter to remind him that he was trying to get through school so that he could provide a better future for her than he otherwise would have been able to. So staying focused, staying determined to succeed, because eventually you're going to go through something that will cause you to question your goals, whether it's pain or boredom. I think probably in school, boredom is the #1 killer of goals. It may not be excess difficulty, but it's just that you got to sit through so many different lectures, and you have to listen to so many boring people talk about boring things. And I admit it. This university is full of boring people who's going to talk to you about boring things. And you're in an endurance race. You just have to get through it. But because they're boring people and they're talking about boring things doesn't let you off the hook. You still have to find whatever important information is supposed to be in that class, and it's your job to extract that information from them. Either extract the information from what's the one interesting thing they say during a 50-minute period, or find the important information in the textbook reading that's been assigned. And it's your job to learn. And so staying determined to succeed through the boredom is probably the ultimate test. And a way that you can do that is remind yourself of the reasons why you chose engineering. Anybody willing to explain why they chose engineering? Yeah?
Because it involved a lot of math and critical thinking, and also that too.
Okay. Math and critical thinking, and that's what you like to do. Ivan, how did you choose engineering?
I want to follow my financial set, so very good mechanical.
All right. So reflecting on why you're trying to achieve something, I think will help you stay determined and will help you reinforce the decision to be successful. Here's a figure that I saw in the news, I think 2 years ago. And let's take a look. It's based on data from 2009, which was just right in the midst of the financial crisis that we had in this country, the economic panic that there was in late 2008, early 2009. So there's two trends that are being illustrated here. All right. So what is the relationship between education level and unemployment? Who's willing to explain that trend? Education level versus unemployment.
The more you're educated, the less likely you are to be unemployed.
Absolutely right. The more education you have, the less likely you are to be unemployed. And by the way, professional degree, what that means is, for example, like an attorney, or something like some of the medical professions is what they mean by a professional degree.
PhD.
No, a PhD is a doctoral degree. Yeah. All right, and then the other trend on being illustrated here, besides the relationship between education and unemployment, is education and salary. And what you see here is this is the median weekly earnings, and so if you have a less than a high school diploma, then you can expect on average to make $454 per week. But someone with a bachelor's degree has more than double the expected income of about $1,000 a week. And of course it goes up from there with increasing education level. And so I think this is why a lot of people accurately decide that for themselves, education is the path to a secure economic future. The other thing that isn't illustrated here is I think that probably the more education you get, the more interesting the work is. I mean, of course, there are exceptions, but if you think about what kind of job someone is doing with less than a high school diploma, they probably don't love their work. That's probably not as likely that they love their work as someone with a master's degree or a bachelor's degree. You have a little bit more control over the type of work you do when you've got more specialization. And the reason why is that if you go on to graduate school, you're going to be picking something that you're interested in. And so you're going to end up working in a field, hopefully, that you're interested in. And so since you've selected engineering, that means that you're not going to be trying to teach pottery classes, or you're not going to be in food services, something that you're not interested in. Other people may be interested in those, but leave those fields to the ones who are. And for me, that's more valuable than the extra income, is being able to do something I'm interested in. As far as application, the textbook makes the point that you have to apply yourself to attain your goals. And so that may involve, and probably will involve, working hard. And they call it work because it sometimes isn't fun. And they mentioned that there are strategies to achieving your goals, that you work smart in addition to working hard. And so in schoolwork, what that may mean is prioritizing your time. Just as an example, this class is 1 credit hour. And so this class shouldn't be a higher priority to you than chemistry or calculus. Those 2 classes are more important than this one. This class, I hope we have a good time. We talk about some important subjects, but if you're really pressed for time, study for chemistry or math before you study for this class, because they have more credit hours, they're going to count more on your transcript, and in the grand scheme of things, you're learning more important things in either of those classes than in this one. So working smart is prioritizing your time. The book puts it in terms of learning how to play the game of academics. Like, academics is just sort of an artificial construct where you're playing a game. Like, there's no real tests once you graduate. You have tests in school, but your first job, the boss isn't going to sit you down, give you a number 2 pencil, and ask you to fill out a bunch of bubble sheets. I mean, that's just not a real thing. It's a substitute for reality, and we do it for good reasons. We're trying to assess what people have learned. We're trying to motivate people to study by having this threat of an exam coming up. But the types of habits you get into in college can set the tone for the seriousness that you take your work once you enter the engineering profession. And so there are ways that you can maximize your effectiveness as a student, like avoiding distractions. And here's the #1 distraction, I think, for students. It's the phone. And some students have told me that the way they maximize their effectiveness is just switching it off entirely when they need to study, so that they're not tempted to check their text messages or tempted to check an update on Facebook or Twitter. If you set little rules for yourself, if you really think about what interrupts you and what are the time wasters that would take you away from achieving your most important goals, you can find lots of ways to maximize your effectiveness. And learn the rules and play the game. And I think there's another slide here in just a second that goes over more of the rules of the academic game. Before we get to that, though, I wanted to point out some of the payoffs. So this is a chemical plant, an image just representing a chemical plant, of which there are dozens of employment opportunities in the local area here. For example, in Marathon Petroleum, which is just across the river in Kentucky, bachelor students who've graduated with a chemical engineering degree can get hired at Marathon with more than $70,000 a year as their starting salary. We've had some of their fresh graduates come and talk to our engineering seminar, and they mentioned that the starting salaries are very generous. In fact, it may be more in the 80s now, because that was a couple of years ago. One of our recent graduates from Marshall, hired on with CSX, $67,500 was his starting salary with the same degree that you're going to be earning. That's with the BSE degree, and his emphasis was civil engineering. By contrast, if you think about all the headaches and hassle that a manager at McDonald's would have to go through complaining customers, employees who may not really love their job. I saw an advertisement for a manager at McDonald's last fall, and the salary was $40,000 a year. And just think of all the headaches of trying to manage something like that. I think it's just a lot easier to put up with a little bit of extra work during college and then graduate with better opportunities once you do. So some of the rules of the game in academics is before class begins, actually do the prerequisites. Know the information that you're supposed to know before the beginning of class. That may mean reviewing the notes from last time. That may mean before you take a course, if you know you're weak in it, sort of brushing up on the material in the weeks before the semester actually begins. Make the most of lectures and classroom time. Just sitting in the classroom isn't making the most of your time. Ways that you can improve your retention of the material is to take notes. Because if we hear something, then maybe we'll remember some small fraction of it. But if we hear it and see it, then that improves our retention a bit more. But if you hear it, see it, and you personally write it down in your own hand, something about that reinforces the memories and allows you to retain it, and it's somehow more interesting and more effective when you do it that way as well. So just think about how can you make the most of the lecture. You know, even if you've got every excuse you could ever want to not pay attention, you'd be fully justified to ignore someone who's boring, right? And you'd be fully justified to ignore a lecture that's about boring content. But if you want to make the most of the time that you're going to spend in the classroom, find some way for that to be effective time. And so force yourself to take notes, force yourself to overcome all the excuses and get something out of that time that's there.
It really helps if they record their lectures.
The textbook is a supplement, not a replacement, meaning that you're supposed to read the textbook chapters, but there are other things as well that will get you towards learning the material. So doing the assignments, practicing problems, writing effective solutions to all the problems. Writing effective solutions means that you'd put the problem statement at the beginning of the solution, that it's neat and organized, and so that someone other than you can figure out how you got to the final answer. And a thing to keep in mind is that when you're an actual practicing engineer, you don't work in these 4-month blocks called semesters. You know, it's maybe easy if you work some example or homework problem in September, you're probably going to remember sort of by December what you did. But think about if you did a design and then 4 years from now someone asks you a question about that design, you're going to need to have your calculations neat enough and organized enough that you can train yourself again several years down the line to figure out, boy, what was I thinking? I don't even remember why I made that pipe 24 inches, or I don't know why I used a certain size steel beam. And so effective solutions to problems is really good practice for the conditions that you'll face after you graduate. Organize your thoughts and develop problem-solving procedure, and assignments indicate a required standard. So just because you do an assignment doesn't mean that you're going to get an A in the class. That means that it's sort of the bare minimum of what you're supposed to be able to do. That, you know, you have to do that, and there are other things as well that you can continue to learn over and above it. There's always going to be extra examples in the text that you can learn from that may go beyond the time that's available in class. And practice, 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 ask, ask, ask. Feel free to check with your professors when you have uncertainty or questions. They and I like it when students stop by with thoughtful questions that show that they've actually been trying to understand things on their own. And because you have a lot of tests, you should come up with some sort of a technique to allow you to relax. And some people say they're not good test takers. You just have to figure out some way to be a good test taker, because you're going to have a lot of them while you're at Marshall. It may be eating candy so your blood sugar is nice and high, or doing, I don't know, mental visualization exercises to get relaxed before the exam. It could be maybe studying before the exam so that you feel confident in the material. But find some sort of a technique that works for you so you can do well on exams. One thing I want to point out is that Marshall has tutoring services available. So let me click on the link that shows you By the way, this lecture is being recorded, so if you don't have time to write down that link, you can watch the video on YouTube. But for example, here's the schedule for the Math Tutoring Center. So if you're doing poorly in math, go see these guys. There's basically every day of the week, anytime you'd want to go there is going to be somebody who could help you out with questions you've got on math assignments. And so you can see that they have different tutors who teach who are familiar with different courses. And in addition to this is just the drop-in schedule. You could be there 5 days a week for hour after hour if you want. But in addition to this, you can also have 2 hours a week of one-on-one tutoring where you can make an appointment, they'll provide a tutor, and it's free. They'll give you individualized service. In addition to this would be mainly if you just want a little bit of homework problem on 1 or 2 little things, or you want them to explain something to you, but it's not too comprehensive. But if you want one-on-one, more personalized attention, they can do that as well. So that's the math tutoring. They also have science tutoring, so you can see chemistry tutors they've got. And a lot of our students end up dropping out of engineering because they can't get through chemistry. But if you do that and you didn't take advantage of the tutoring, then that's really a lost opportunity, because those tutors can do a lot to help you get through something that's otherwise challenging. So perseverance means that you don't give up when the going gets tough. And one of the other keys that's mentioned in the text is that you need to be careful who you spend time with, because they'll rub off on you. And if you spend time with negative people or underachievers, then it's inevitable that you yourself will start to be negative or achieving less than you could have if you were associating with people who did share your goals. So I urge you to keep those things in mind. Now, the assignment I've just given you is due in 47 hours. So you've got Wednesday at noon, and I'd like you to type up some thoughtful responses to those questions. In general, it should probably be more than a page to really put enough thought into each of those questions for it to be considered full credit. But it's just a way for you to start thinking about what you're trying to achieve in school and how you might get there. So I'll see you on Wednesday in class, and let me know if you've got any questions.